Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our request and joining us over here. We will straight away jump to the topic. And my first question for you is, as a business leader, how do you like to define learning and continuous learning?
So thank you, Subrat. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone for bearing us. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so hopefully we'll make the answers short, and hopefully you will kind of endure for the next few minutes. So I think there is a logical inconsistency in continuous learning, the whole phrase. So learning is neither continuous, and I don't think it can be, in a sense, about learning at all. So to my mind, I think executive education or learning, as we see in the companies today, organizations today, is more about unlearning rather than learning. Because all of us, through our formal education, through our initial experiences, have developed a set of mental models of how things are done, how things could be done. We discussed AI in the previous session and the previous session. The question is, why does AI elicit such a response? The thing is, because it's a completely discontinuous technology, and it shifts your mental models, and you say, look, how can I make sense of things around me with my older mental model? So I think in this sense, today's executive learning, and for all the young executives here, for the future, if there is one skill one needs to have, it is about how you unlearn what you have, let go of that paradigm, and then kind of relearn something else. And that leaner learning, that brings me to the other part of the point that you said. Relearning is more about not a continuous 2-minute bite, I pick up something from Instagram or pick up a bite-sized stuff and read it. It's about a far more immersive, leap into something, stepping back, coming to it, getting some bite size in the middle, and then going back. So it's about a very structured way of immersive learning, coupled with some kind of a continuous nuggets or nudges, etc., to kind of reinforce that learning. That's how I see continuous learning.
You have led organizations across the spectrum. They're at cutting edge. You also have handled and led the legacy organizations. As a leader, how do you see the balance between tech and touch? So there are opinions on both the sides, that this will work, that will not work. How do you look at this entire thing of technology, human touch?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I think those of us who had the privilege of leading organizations realize that the reality is that there isn't a tech versus human touch. Actually, it's actually depending on the organization. It's a sequence in which in tech and human touch can or should come, right? In many organizations, tech is needed first to kind of break a pattern or take that organization to another orbit. Tech is needed as a first input, right, or a first intervention, and then the human touch follows, right? And I'll give you a classic example. It happens in tech organizations around the world. The most prolifically, productive organizations, and these 3 trillion dollar companies in the world. Apart from being tech leaders, there are also companies which have had the most significant attrition of people in the recent times, right? Now, why is that? If you deep dive a little bit into it, it's because in those organizations, because change is so fast, right? Tech has to lead first, and then comes the human touch. So here comes Satya Nadella, and he says, "Look, I'm all about changing the soul of my organization, and it's all about mindset and this, that, and the other." And at the other end, just in the evening, he sacks 20,000 people. How do you reconcile it? It's not about tech or touch. It's about in what sequence you put tech and what sequence you put touch. So that's one point that I want to say. The second is that I think in learning specifically, tech often creates an illusion of learning, right? You go and ask a question to chat GPT, it will give you perfectly reasonable answers. If you are not aware of that subject, and that was a point that came in the previous discussion, if you're not aware of that subject, you may fall for it as a reasonable answer, right? The sense is that it may or may not be a reasonable answer. It may be a brilliant answer, but it may be a plausible answer. Technology is, and all these LLMs, AI are about plausibility. They are mathematical models. They convert whatever you do to a mathematical model and they put statistics behind it and outcomes are things, right? So it is plausibility that is more important in technology systems than reality or than the real output. And it takes a lot of self-learning and a lot of discrimination to spot that, look, I want to kind of be now a human to make a meta-analysis of what this tech is giving.
So you talked about illusion of learning, and I love that phrase when you said, as a leader, how do you measure the effectiveness of learning? So, you send your team members to some program or any learning intervention. How do you measure that? Because that has always been a question, and I feel a lot of people will resonate this. How do you calculate the ROI? How do you go about it?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question, most difficult question. I think over the years, after having invested both myself and and a lot of my colleagues in executive education or development or training and so on and so forth, I realized that I think I have all my life been measuring the wrong metric of training effectiveness. So people say the training effectiveness metric is productivity. I guarantee no leader in this room can tell me an occasion that there has been that anyone who's been through a training program has suddenly become more productive, right? The real measure, and that's what is in my in my view the more difficult way of the more difficult task of leadership. The real measure of training or executive development is attrition. If someone goes through a training program like this or an intervention like this and stays in my organization for the next 24 months and ideally moves to a higher role or a different role, right? It may not be higher role, it may be a different role, and performs well, that for me is the success of it. So there can never be a unidimensional success metric to one learning intervention. At the same time, there cannot be a productivity match to any single or even two. If you add, it cannot be that way. What can help up is that if you take someone through that, right, and that's where again tech and touch comes in. The leadership's touch will ensure or not ensure that the employee stays with the organization for a long time. If he or she stays, then the value is immense. And that, I think, is the only real measure of real ROI of training that I have been able to kind of figure out. The other part, I think, is that in such interventions, what is the goal of those interventions, right? Somebody is coming to this kind of a conference. What is the goal of the organization that sends you? If the goal is that, look, in your job you'll work better, I think it's a wasted effort. You can, chat with a chatbot, that will give you brilliant answers and you can get all stuff. If it is about role enhancement, then these programs are really valuable because they open minds, right? So any training done for purposes of reinforcing a particular skill or a habit, or I want my organization's values to be there, more or less, ends up in a failure. But a training to give open minds of people and train them for higher perspectives so that when they take another role, they have a different perspective in life, right? Or different way of looking at a problem. To my mind, that's the most valuable ROI that can come out of any learning intervention.
Well, that's again an interesting perspective when you talked about not productivity but attrition. But on that note, so you must be receiving, and you would have received thousands of proposals about this training program, that training program. For the understanding of all of us, what are some of the red flags which when you look at in a, say any training intervention, the moment you see that you say, okay, this is a no-go zone. What are some of the red flags?
So someone who promises, look, by the end of 2 days or 3 days or 5 days or 1 week, this guy will be a completely different person. I say, look, sorry, something is happening. The other is, if it is filled with a lot of jargons, pathways and, agentic and all kinds of stuff, that clearly is a red path to me. The best proposals, learning proposals, are simple, direct, have a very clear problem that they're solving. A lot of training, and you are in that business, so I can take your example. A lot of organizations which offer training usually offer their own generic solution and try and kind of propose a problem to the client, right? Whereas that problem may or may not be of the client. So if you come to me and say, look, in my organization, which is a holidays, Mahindra Holidays, right? In my organization, if you say, look, tech is going to take over the world, I'll teach your people in how to interact with an LLM. I'm just saying, right? I said, okay, just because LLM is a buzzword or ChatGPT is a buzzword, you come and give me all that. But what if you come to me and say, look, I know your people need to be trained in how to better deliver guest experience, right? Using A, B, C, D. I'm much more into it, right? So I think, today is the age where, training or such proposals need to be very, very custom made for organizations and not a generic transplantation from some stuff, right? And the last bit is, if any proposal has no grammatical mistakes, I say something is wrong. So maybe somebody else has written it. So maybe let's kind of get back.
Thank you so much. So in fact, the one point which I derive is that what you are trying to say is that one should do the homework before sending or before reaching out for any L&D interventions, rather than just sharing the same generic bit. Perhaps are you also trying to say that the learning and development programs are more, or executive learning programs are more efficient when they also have someone who has got the industry experience also co-delivering?
It's yes and no to my mind, because like we discussed, if part of learning is unlearning, right? A very deep industry experience actually reinforces that learning, right? We discussed about biases, etc. in data. The biggest bias in human learning is that the person who's imparting the learning thinks that he or she has a certain model that is beneficial to the other. So there is a presumption of superiority or superior intellectual accomplishment on the part of the thing, right? That, to my mind, is a dangerous territory, right? We go on all these interventions, right? So let me take another example, right? There are these classroom interventions that happen, right? And you say, look, about risk and working in groups and this, that, and that, right? Now compare that with somebody you took a group on a trek, right? And you have to scale, you have to stay in a camp, etc. And in fact, the next speaker, you can ask him, he went to Kailash and what did he face and coming back on. So suppose somebody goes to Kailash, I'm just taking that example, and that group comes back, a group of 40 people comes back. You tell me, do you need to teach that person, that group, anyone in that group, how to survive the odds? Do you need to teach them how to collaborate with each other, right? Do you need to teach them how to be strong when adversity comes? No, because you put people in a situation, right? Because learning is putting in a simulated situation, till the time you don't give that illusion, or till the time you don't make that simulation seem real enough, there'll never be a real learning, right? And to my mind, that is important. If you want to deliver real learning, I think it should be a mix of people who are not of that background, ideally, and therefore, today you see, and some of the practices you also have told me, so I'm just repeating what you have told me, is about people like stand-up comics coming to kind of take sessions, right? Artists coming and sharing how they prepare for this song, right? People from different backgrounds, not necessarily from a hospitality to hospitality or tech to tech, etc. So I think it helps certainly when you need very functional skills, but if you need leadership level skills, I think a mix is far more valuable.
So on that note, I'm just sharing my personal experience. There's a lot of discussion around AI, but a lot of people whom I have interacted with who talk very fondly about AI, but when you go into depth, they say we are almost there. A lot of platforms, a lot of otherwise interventions, but we are almost there. And for me, honestly, almost is a very deadly word. I say either you are there or you are not there. But from a leader perspective, how do you see this entire discussion and debate around AI? Is there are use cases, or it is more of a...
Yeah. So I'll give you a data point first, and then there are some real use cases I think you mentioned in the previous discussion. So an MIT study recently noted that 95% of AI kind of experiments across companies of different sizes actually have not yielded any ROI, right? These all started as vanity projects because you had to jump onto some new bandwagon, and then it's not very difficult to figure out why, right? A new technology comes, it's actually a very life-changing technology for those of us who really interact with us daily, and it can do a lot of things, right? But in technology, we call something called a hype cycle, right? It's at the peak of its hype cycle. The reality will settle down and there will be use cases that come. And therefore, people are trying to use AI as a, one-off tool. A size-fits-all kind of a tool, right? I'll give you an example. Today, OpenAI did this study last year and then this year. So OpenAI ChatGPT's owners there, and they started in 2022, December. So in 2023, they said, what is the maximum use of AI, right? What are people using? Because they had some 300, 400 million users by then, 300 million users. So what was it? Just guess. So the first year, people are asking questions, right? People are asking questions to them. They did a study 3-4 months back. What was the conclusion? Just guess.
See.
No, actually, the asking questions or getting information from ChatGPT is number 6 now. Number 1 is it fills. So it is a companion for me. So I want to share my emotions with AI because it will not judge me. Second is psychiatric help. Third is health problems. Fourth is, surprisingly, not surprisingly actually, family related problems, husband and wife. Right? And then so all 5 are essentially on the side of people who are saying, look, in this, this type of life, so you can see how things move within 1 year, right? So, the point that I'm trying to, drive home here is that, technology takes many shapes, right? We need not, box technology in one box, right? And therefore, if use cases have not yet emerged, right? It is not so much a limitation of technology as imagination of people. Having said that, there are some very definite use cases. Call center optimization, super use case, right? People are scaling down call centers and BPMs, etc., because they find a very nice use case of voice-enabled voice. Again, it's a big success, but I think it's still a little bit metallic. But yes, you can actually have that, right? Content creation, huge, huge impact of AI. Today, it's very easy to, it was almost impossible to take 4 or 5 images and you can actually make a moving video from that, right? You can use, you can write and everyone becomes a creator, right? That is yet to come, but today everyone can become a creator. So, today you find flawlessly written resignation letters and all kinds of communication in organization. Those are all outcome of how people are using AI today. But going forward, and then there is a manufacturing huge use cases of say, they do a virtual twin, right? So, the entire, auto plants have a virtual twin, and they know at what point in time predicted maintenance is required. Now, all these, there are significant use cases, but, it's not as if AI tomorrow is going to, become a, some guru and answering everyone's questions and telling you do this, you do that, etc. That time is still far off. Whether time will come or not, we don't know, but that time is still far off.
So you talked about use cases in this scenario. What would be some of the, good international or national executive, learning examples which you'd like to share for both corporates and academics?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that I would share is, I think, Google has this beautiful program. It's called G2G, Googler to Googler. Their realization is that, peer education, is probably far more impactful than, only a faculty-driven, kind of intervention. So Googler to Googler, where there are about 6,000 people, in Googlers who actually contribute to the learning of other Googlers, right? And they get credits for it, and so it's a good system that they have made, right? So that is one brilliant example of how a company uses both academia, which is external experts and profs, as well as your internal resources to kind of optimize the learning path. So the same Googler in some cases is sitting in the audience, in some cases sitting at the faculty. Now that makes it. So it's a brilliant way of kind of handling it. The other is of Amazon's program. It's about Skilling 2025 that comes to my mind, where what they do is they offer for non-tech folks, right? They offer a graduate level, machine learning and related courses, which you can do for free, right? And that is an intervention. Again, a lot of it is driven by tech, but some of it is also driven by people, right? The third, and I think it's an Indian example. I'll give you an Indian example of how it works in a slightly senior level cases. So in Mahindra, we have two interventions. One for the middle management who are high performers in middle management, and others for top leadership who are required in some years to kind of either move to another organization or scale that organization scaling up. So the first is called MALT, right? It's a Mahindra Accelerated Leadership Track, and the second is called Future Shapers, right? Mahindra Future Shapers. So both these programs have some things in common, and I think something that is important that could be a takeaway. One is that they are tied up with a university, in the case of MALT with Tepper, and with Future Shapers with Harvard, and now with Oxford, to kind of deliver some of this, right? One. Second, it's a year-long thing. It's not about a few days, etc. Third, and I think the most important, is that there is a coaching mechanism available, right? And for the entire year, all participants get a coach, right? If you ask me, I've been through the Future Shapers program. Of course, going to Harvard is a high, you do these off-site workshops, it's very enjoyable, you're taking time away from work. But the biggest impact has happened in coaching, through coaching, right? And that has given me and people like me a lot of insights that we never thought we had about ourselves, right? And surprisingly, that helped us discover a coach in an AI, right? So once that formal coaching is over, now an AI-based coaching, all taken by ourselves, not company sponsored, is the kind of path to sustain. So I think these are some examples that you could think of, and in every case, there is an organization's own strengths and organization's own ability to impart knowledge, which is coupled with what academia brings to it, or what specialists bring.
So I know your passion for reading. So perhaps last question: one book which you will recommend for corporates to read, one book which you will recommend for academicians to read.
Okay, I think I generally don't like management books. So to my so you have to excuse me. So I think I'll give you two books anyone can read. One is a slightly difficult read, and the other is a mandatory read. Okay, the slightly difficult read is a book called Love in the Time of Cholera. Right, it's by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. So it's a brilliant book because it will bring about the extent to which human emotions in changing times can be transplanted, right? The other book is of course similar book, but I think even more voluminous. So if you really want to put it on your bookshelf, you can do that. Is War and Peace. Absolutely mandatory reading if someone is really interested in history. It's a historical fiction, a genre that I really like. The mandatory read, I think, is Mahabharata, right? And over the last 16, 17 years, I must have read some, 15, 16 different editions of Mahabharata. And if you read that book, like they say, whatever is there, right? Whatever issues you go in with, you'll find some parallel there in some story or the other. Whatever is there, you will not find elsewhere. But whatever you will not find elsewhere is certainly there, right? So these are the 2-3 books I think people can learn. But if you want management books, I'm the wrong person to ask.
Not that. But on another note, I have been privy, so I'm also waiting for one book from you to come out. I know that has been a work in progress, and knowing your penchant for excellence, you will not come out with it till you are 100% sure. Maybe with your permission, we can take 2 quick questions.
Yeah.
The rule of the game is very simple. You will just raise your hand and shoot the questions. I have asked them to stop serving lunch, and they will not start till the time we leave from here. But we can have 2 quick questions from the audience. Anyone, please go ahead. Any question? Anyone? Yes, sir. Please.
Hello, good afternoon. I am Martin Shankar Rastogi. I am from Delhi. I am a lawyer by profession. So after hearing you, it was quite insightful. So I heard and I could understand your hierarchy in which AI is being used these days. So healthcare, psychiatric treatment and solitude. So do you think that it is because of mental health issues that this has aggravated the use of AI? That is also a contributory thing because people are not using it as much for technological advancement, but because of their solitude or mental health issues?
So partly it's true that there is increased incidence of mental health issues, etc., and that's leading people to find comfort in the arms of a robo and a disembodied entity rather than a real person. So you're right, it's part, but I don't. It's a slight simplification. It's a little bit like saying that I use Instagram because I want to look pretty. That's not actually the case. People use Instagram. These technologies have a way of democratizing stuff, right? OpenAI, if you use a ChatGPT particularly, because that's where a lot of action is. But there are others one. But I'm saying if you use ChatGPT, the beauty of that medium is that it will without reinforcing your bias, and I heard about bias and it's also true, but I'm just trying to give another perspective. Without reinforcing your problems, right, it will not disagree with you. So there is a coded bias of saying, yeah, you're right, but can you look at it from this perspective? And that appeals to people because it's non-threatening, right? And that is why a lot of that kind of a conversation of personal nature has moved. Astrology, another feature, right? It used to be domain of specialists. Now, why is astrology in the top 10? Is it because people are very scared of what Trump will do or what somebody and so on? Yeah, perhaps. But it is also because, yesterday you went to astrologer and he made some chart and you had no head or tail out of it. Today you can ask ChatGPT and say, look, you look at it from Vedic astrology, look at it from Western astrology, tell me what you think about it. Right? So the issue is that it's democratized, that technology has democratized conversation, if I may use the word. Right? So that's what I think is the real reason.
We can take one more question. Yes, please. You can have the mic.
So this is Darius from Access AMC. You spoke about how to effectively measure ROI of executive training, and you mentioned attrition as one of the indicators. Right? If I put some MBA mumbo jumbo to it, there's something called lead indicators or lag indicators. This sounds to me like a lag indicator. Maybe you can point out one or two lead indicators that can give me in a short term some insight whether the executive training was effective or not.
Are you an HR professional, Malcolm?
I am an HR professional.
Okay, so let me answer this question very simply. If your training intervention has been entertaining and people have come out happy and without reams of takeaways, you should consider it a nice intervention that you've done. That's a lead indicator. Frequently people in your training programs, right? This somehow I'm nominated to it, let me go through it somehow, I'm sitting in nice food, lunch, chow, that kind of stuff, right? If people come out genuinely happy about what they have heard in the classroom, right? I think that's the lead indicator. You may get any number of forms filled and I can guarantee, the score will never be lower than 4.5, right? Out of 5, if it's a scale of 5. So it's not any lead indicator, right? The lead indicator to my mind is how you make people feel in the classroom. And that's very human, that's never machine, right? Only humans can make other humans feel genuinely happy. Machines can make them feel less lonely, but humans can fill them with happiness. That I think is it. And that also therefore differentiates a great facilitator from an average one, or a great program from an average one.
Thank you so much, sir. I can share a secret with all of you. I requested him to join us because the last time I had a privilege of listening to him, he is known for speaking his mind, and I can never forget, I was sharing with him his one statement which I quoted at numerous occasions in our last interaction. We were talking about the skills for new, MBA graduates who will be passing out. It was a round table wherein everyone talked about humility. And he had a very strong point when he said, okay, well, I hear you when you talk about humility, but do not make humility as an excuse to hide your inefficiency. Do not make humility an excuse to hide your inefficiency. And that is something, sir, which I have been taking and sharing everywhere. It was an absolute pleasure and honor having you here. Thank you everyone for being such a lovely audience. Please give a big, big, big round of applause. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pandey. Yeah, it's working. Thank you, Mr. Pandey, for those wonderful answers. insights that made us think, stories we related to, and even a few surprises that kept us hooked. Truly fascinating all the way through. And a special thanks to Dr. Kumar for keeping the conversation so lively. Together, you have truly made this session iconic. Let's give them both a big round of applause. And may I now request Dr. Ravi Jain, Director, IILM University, Gurgaon, to come on the dais and felicitate Mr. Pandey.
Ashutosh, it is such a joy to listen to you. Amazing.